Hey, I'm Bryan Jones and Scoober. I'm here with Sky Magazine and also Jonathan Neeley of Inside Breaks, also for Sky Magazine. We're recapping the day one of Fall Easterns here in 2011 in Wilmington. So we had an exciting day today, Neeley. You got to look at Pool A, especially your alumni of Virginia. How did that go for them?
Yeah, that is the primary reason I wanted to hang around Pool A. It did not go well. Night Train just had a bad day coming out, and this is the first tournament of the season with basically a new roster from last year. And while there were 16 returners to this year's team, a lot of the heavy lifters from last year have gone on. And this year's got loads of talent, loads of guys who've been around, been to nationals twice now, but just people who got the job done, especially on the win and especially against zones, which is what we saw a lot of, have moved on. So in Virginia, going on, just summarizing the pool, Virginia came in as the 1 seed, so their schedule had them seeing William and Mary first, Carnegie Mellon second, and I'm blanking, Delaware third. Coming in from the start, there's a lot of zone, a lot of just a close 4-man cup from William and Mary that made it tough for Virginia to get it upfield. It moved well together, but also they had a hard time getting hooks off in the cup. And one thing that happened in the William and Mary game that rang true for the rest of the day was an inability to huck the disc. And William and Mary was, I talked to their captain Andrew Fickley after the game, and they were very willing to play just a sloppy, similar to what we saw in last year's college final, a possession game and a field position game more than that. And when UVA started doing that late in the day, very late in the day, they did see some results. But to figure out this is what we want to do, this is what we coming in was let's figure out a system, let's figure out how to make this work. So you saw UVA going down to William and Mary and then to Carnegie Mellon.
I didn't actually catch that game, but same result. Really, just some offensive struggles compounded with the frustrations from that. Showed when just getting beat to the fourth side, dropping some discs. It's hard when the momentum is so low and you have none to even execute things that I think everybody expects to come automatically. And then another loss to Delaware. Delaware late in the game in the second half, like I said, they started playing a more field position oriented game and saw some results. They were putting up hucks that to most teams in normal conditions like that is absolute crap. And some of the players were really reluctant to start throwing that. But then all of a sudden they were coming down with them. And that would lead to like a 1/3 score after that. It's just a matter of getting it down the field. And, I think something that they realized and that showed throughout the tournament today, and we saw it at last year's Easterns in the spring, at this tournament, with the wind the way it is and college offenses not being automatic.
25-mile-an-hour plus winds.
Yeah, it was big, very gusty. It's not whether or not you turn it, you're going to turn it. Nobody's going to go turnover free, but where? And if you turn it down the field and you make the opposition, especially a defensive offense, work the entire length, you're going to see some results from that. They might not come automatically, but it's not a bad strategy. If you turn it close enough to give the other team a 15, 20-yard field, and you do that frequently, you can try to play clean ultimate, you can try to play pretty ultimate all you want, but that's probably a recipe for a loss. So that's what I saw in Pool A from Virginia's perspective. Delaware went 3-0, and then they lost their crossover against South Carolina, but at that point they have a 1 seed locked up anyway. That was just for seeding side of the bracket. I was talking to Delaware captain MJ, who is one of 2 captains that went to Amherst High School, and since coming in, I think they're both juniors now. They've really worked this year to kind of take a step back and recognize that they need to approach things with a level of professionalism. I think in Delaware, there's a team that back in 2006 and 2007, a lot of the veterans on that team.
And Sean Keegan, notably of that.
Well, Keegan was a young player.
That's true.
At that point. Keegan finished playing Delaware in 2010. So I was talking to him, before the tournament, and really the players that he learned from, guys that you see on Southpaw now, guys that were big parts of the Hooray for Co-Ed teams that went to nationals. Delaware had a strong faction of players that played at a very high club level, and that translated obviously into an approach in college that was effective. And then there was a gap of 2 or 3 seasons where most players were not interested in spending their summers dedicated to a club team. and that kind of showed over the last few years. And I think that what the Delaware Captains now and the entire team, they're looking to get back to not just let's play club, but more just let's approach this game. I think the way that they would say it, the right way, in a way that is indicative of a team that's looking to take care of business and win games.
Mhm.
So, excuse me, but you saw Delaware, produce today, and I think that they're going to be good going into tomorrow as well.
So then we're looking at Pool B as well.
Yeah.
I got to see Ohio pretty much dominate that pool. A pool full of JMU, NC State, and Georgetown. Ohio really had no trouble at all going through that competition. Ended up losing their crossover later on the day to a good UNC team, but we'll get to that. Looking at the other teams, after Ohio can't handle business, JMU had to deal with kind of the scrappy NC State team. Ended up taking second in the pool. NC State, as we know, loves to stay in games late, no matter who their opponent is. And they ended up pulling out one in the crossover hugely over Penn State after being down 12-6 and came back on a 7-0 run with a great catch in the end zone over two other Penn State players to win that game. From there, we saw JMU and Georgetown kind of battle it out. Ryan Thompson is now the head coach of Georgetown. Told me before the tournament that we were going to see a lot of defense, a lot of turnovers created by them, but their offense was going to have a little bit of trouble. And I believe they ended up taking fourth in that pool, and we saw JMU go on to face UConn in the crossover game. From there, though, it was pretty simple. NC State was the big surprise in the crossover, and Ohio just kind of took care of business.
So going back to Ohio, can you just tell me a little bit about Ohio on the field? I know that they have a pretty short rotation, or just a smaller roster. I think they have 18.
Yeah, they're playing mostly veterans. They like to go out and play a lot. They have a lot of Mad Cow experience from club. So most notably Mitch Scion. You'll see him around the disc a lot, center handler, distributing it around. Other veterans include Nick Wetzel. So we'll see a lot of veterans out there, and Ohio can sometimes run themselves into the ground. But they do have a very good chemistry with that unit they have out there, a lot of trust with the disc, and that's how they usually beat opponents with that Mad Cow experience, tough defense, and savage play.
Do you see a lot of underneath cutting? Is it a team that can get really hot with the deep ball?
You can see both from them. They're pretty versatile in how they do things. That's what makes them one of the better teams here. Is they'll try to hit you underneath and they'll dump and swing when they need to, and they'll also have the capability to beat you deep.
Yeah.
So that's they're not one-dimensional like some of the teams we're going to see.
Right.
Now, one of the bigger surprises today took place in Pool C.
Yeah.
We expected Wilmington to really kind of carry that pool, but that wasn't the case. So what was the surprise there?
South Carolina came out and won Pool C, and before the tournament, the Gamecocks captain Chris Van Thiel had emailed me saying that they had some injuries. They don't make cuts. They sort of take, if you're on the team, you're on the team. They don't have enough people to really be turning people away en masse. And he reiterated today to me, like, we're kind of going in blindly. We're not sure how this tournament's going to go for us. South Carolina has been on the up for the last few seasons. They've had, one of those teams that's been challenging their regional opponents like Georgia, Georgia Tech. They've given tough games to them. And they've grown as a team, but this fall Easterns, they were like, we're not really sure how it's going to go. Well, it went quite well.
Yeah.
They came out and they took down UNC Wilmington to start 12-11.
Well, actually, they ended up taking down Ohio State in the first game.
Okay.
Huge margin victory there, 15-14 or 15-4, excuse me. But yeah, in the Wilmington game, they definitely battled it out. 8-5 at half. Wilmington kind of stormed back into that, and then they took the lead and kind of commanded the rest of the way out.
Yeah.
But they definitely look good. Chris Van Thiel, huge part of that.
Yeah, he's a good player, and he's very big. I think his presence on the field leads his team well. He's got sure hands, and he stays very positive. And they've got a number of other guys who they're a fun team to watch because it's clear that they like to be gritty together. They've got some guys who like to throw, some guys who like to catch, and it's interesting because they have certain players who have very glaring weaknesses. I saw one guy who really couldn't throw a flick, but he was making plays for them deep and coming up with with blocks underneath as well. And an interesting thing about South Carolina, Chris was telling us that they really do like to just go out and play. And he summed that up as he sees it as the spirit of the game. He doesn't like to micromanage. He doesn't like to, plot out everything. He noticed that a lot of the other teams here really do spend a lot of time managing their approach, which I think for some teams that works well. For South Carolina, they sometimes they don't even call lines. It's just if you're good to go, if you're feeling good, go ahead and hop on the line.
Mm.
Today, it worked well, and they looked comfortable in the wind. They took down Delaware handily in the crossover. Delaware did say that they weren't really playing the game to win. They were going to open up the rotation completely, knowing that they had their 1 seed locked up.
Mm-hmm.
But still, for South Carolina to go out and win, I think 15-6, 15-7.
15-6, yeah.
Big day for South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. So moving on then, we have Wilmington, came in. They were one of the teams that challenged Virginia last year for the regional title. A lot of new faces on the team. A lot of young, very good faces.
Some youth.
Mm-hmm.
I think, for Wilmington, that bodes well, having 2 very involved, very experienced coaches. And their rookies, I was talking to one, Xavier Maxted, who's from the Northern Virginia area where I'm living now, and saw them play a little bit in high school. They've now got 2 YHB players from right outside of DC. Those guys love the coaches, and for a young team to have not only veterans that buy into the coaches, but also for themselves to enjoy playing for those guys, that means that development-wise, they're just going to shoot up.
Mm-hmm.
They've now got people, they've got the talent, but to have 2 guys who are in your ear letting you know, hey, you can do this a little differently, you can improve here, that bodes very well for Wilmington.
Mm-hmm.
So
one of their other pickups is, I believe, a varsity or club soccer player that doesn't have the throwing skills, but definitely Greg Vassar, coach, was telling me that most athletic kid on the team by far.
Mm.
So Wilmington has some time to develop, and looks like they'll be pretty good come spring.
Yeah.
The other teams we're looking at is Ohio State, which went through kind of a tryout process for this tournament, and kind of shocking that they went through and they ended up losing their first game by a large margin, but they actually rebounded to win against Wilmington. So, we got a chance to watch them a little bit also against a surprise team in Carnegie Mellon in the crossover, which was expected Ohio State typically to come out of that matchup, but Carnegie Mellon has been an up-and-coming team.
Yep.
And did you get a chance to watch them?
I didn't get to see them that much. That was the Virginia game that I didn't keep an eye on. But the thing I would say about Carnegie Mellon, I remember seeing them a few seasons back at spring break, and they just had a lot of people who didn't look like they knew what they were doing. And that doesn't seem to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mean to put them down in any way back then, but this year's team really does look like they've got guys that seem more athletic, guys who, get to the disc in the air. They had one guy who had rec specs. He's Asian. He has rec specs. I don't know his name, but he was making big throws for them and kind of just a workhorse. And they also have a coach whose name escapes me, but I've met him before. He used to play at Georgia Tech in 2008, 2007, 2008, 2009 era. So Carnegie Mellon, definitely another surprise. Not quite the South Carolina of the tournament, but to make it into elimination play, I don't think that anybody saw that coming.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and I guess that's a team that we really need to watch for tomorrow come quarters. Definitely a team to keep an eye on. Now, their opponent in the crossover was Ohio State. That definitely was – they told me they were still in the tryout phase, so their results shouldn't be too shocking. They said they came in the first game, dusting wins, a lot of zone play, and you have 14 rookies out of your 28 men there. You're going to have some issues, especially if you keep playing them. So Ohio State will still be there in the Ohio Valley region. They always have been for a while, been a strong contender. So this tournament shouldn't be how we judge them, I think, going forward. For them, they have some time in the spring. And the other team below them, we had Wilmington finishing third, and then I'm blanking on the last one, GW or George Washington, right? And so they had a close game with UNCW.
Yeah, they came out and they took UNCW to 12-11. That's what I was saying earlier from the South Carolina game. Something that was not public knowledge before the tournament, but Wilmington's coach, Greg Vassar, mentioned to me they had a mix-up with their club sports department and weren't allowed to practice for the past week. They had a 1-week suspension from their fields.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that showed a little bit in their game against GW. I know that GW also picked up 2 new coaches, guys from up in the DC area, Tom Pino and Jimmy. What's Jimmy's last name? Press? Nah. We're working on it. The details, sometimes they're sparse. But those guys definitely are looking to kind of sink their teeth into the program. And I think that the players there are down for that.
Mhm.
But that's going to take time. Right now, I think G-Dub it's one of those teams that maybe over the past few years, the dedication to practice or just the focus can kind of go a little bit like this, up and down. So to bring in a coaching staff is big. They went 0 for 4 today, but and getting dinner with those coaches afterward, I think that they did feel like already some positive strides were taken.
Mhm. So then we move forward to Pool D, looking at probably the most competitive pool of the day
Yeah.
with top teams. We had UNC, we had Penn State, which is actually number 1 in the pool, and we had UConn before looking down at UNC-WB. We got a chance to watch the UNC-UConn game, which was pretty windy, and UNC was able to work it up. What did you see in that game?
Well, the interesting thing about that game is, as windy as it was, there were no breaks until 7-7. Or it was 6-6, and
UNC got the upwind and then took the downwind immediately for half.
Yeah. So, was it? UNC started on offense in that game, so it couldn't have been. Anyway, there were no breaks until late in the first half, and there were tons of turns just nobody could convert in the upwind end zone. The thing that stood out for me with UNC is against a zone, they spaced the field very well and relied on their 3 handlers back to move the disc well enough to then get to the gaping holes and get a 30-yard gainer. And the guy getting those gainers was Thomas Sayre McCord, who I think was probably the best player I saw on the field today.
Yeah. Got all region last year without even making it to regionals.
Yeah, I always thought of him as a downfield player. He played a season with Ring of Fire and was with UNC. He's been with UNC for a few years now, and big receiver, tall guy, fast. But his throws today were money, both upwind and downwind. Just the right amount of outside in to get around the cup, or the right quickness to get through the cup. When he spotted a defender, oftentimes Kristen Johnson, downfield, Thomas was able to hit him, and he was really what made UNC go, because not only was he doing that, he was also playing deep for their zone, and that made the deep lanes pretty tough on UConn.
There was some other guys too for UNC that got the job done. Marshall Ward really comes to mind. He was a big mark in the zone as well as being a consistent handler. Right now they're missing Tristan Green, who's on study abroad. So when he returns, we'll see a little bit of a different UNC team because he played a big role last year. The thing I was most surprised about with UNC is that their composure was so good in this wind. And last year I saw so many times they get frustrated and go on runs where they would drop the disc just 3 possessions in a row and just kind of self-destruct. And so that was really impressive. It's only one day, but that's a really good stride for them to move forward. The other team, they were facing that game was UConn, which is the lone Metro East representation.
Yeah.
They ended up taking second in the pool. We saw them kind of be a little bit more one-dimensional, but they had a couple good players and were able to kind of bomb it deep. What did you like from them, and what didn't you like?
I liked watching Camille, and we haven't decided on
Savaric.
Savaric. Is that what he told you?
Yes.
Yeah, Camille Savaric is their thrower, and he has really strong downwind hucks. And that a lot of people can hug it downwind, but his accuracy, he can throw it without the disc bouncing. He can put it 80 yards. That really served a good purpose for UConn. Put that in a funny way, but that was UConn's biggest strength, having him just hit receivers in a tight window. I don't know, what else did you like about UConn?
That was really, they have big playmakers. Bryan, his nickname's the Torch. He's a great athlete. You can tell he's more athlete right now than ultimate player at times. And the one thing, though, that UConn really is going to need to work on, because likely they're going to face Cornell in the regional final. That's predicted. And, maybe some other team comes up, but they have to figure out a way to grind through games. Right now they're relying on Camille so much to make those throws that against UNC, that's what really made them falter. UNC trusted a little bit more. While we had Sayre McCord making big throws, he could swing it still and trust his guys.
Definitely.
So UConn moving forward is going to have to work on that. But they came out with a bang, went up 7-1 on Penn State, which is kind of unexpected for me. But Penn State was having problems early in the day and later in the day and self-destructing. So that game started out immediately 7-1 UConn. Penn State comes out to make it a game, and UConn ends up winning 12-11 on Universe to really make them second in the pool. And Penn State kind of started to look better as the day went on. Ended up losing to UNC. that was a team full of guys who could just break the mark at will. I mean, Jeff Keel was a big playmaker for them. Tom Allen is another one. What else did you like from Penn State?
Well, I caught most of their crossover game with NC State, and in the beginning of the game, I said to you, this is the best team at dumping and swinging that I've seen all day, and it was windy. Not only their break mark throws, but their cutting timing was great. Their spacing is good. They clearly have a lot of chemistry, and people have a sense of where they're supposed to cut and when. I like that a lot. I also like their defensive intensity. A couple times, guys getting beat. The disc, dumping, swinging, and moving up, and the cup, guys recovering in the cup, and either getting to their spot at the right time or laying out at the right time and recovering well. You like to see that, especially on a day when it's cold and windy and the fields are kind of hard. That's going to set your team apart if you're the ones out there running like that. So I like that a lot about Penn State. And then we actually kind of stopped watching when Penn State was up. I think Penn State was up 12-7. And
12-6.
12-6. Okay.
Yeah.
So NC State went on a 7-point run to end that game. They went from down 12-6 to winning 13-12. Unfortunately, Penn State had a couple. They had two that were, a guy caught it right on the sideline, and to his credit, he could have argued himself in. Both times he dropped the disc and put it down. You like to see that, but that was two things that did not go well for them.
Yeah.
They had a couple of just untimely errors, and NC State got hot, and you could feel that momentum when they pulled. It like they're going to go down and get a D, and that certainly frustrated Penn State. They weren't the deepest team today, and you saw things getting a little bit chippy, a little bit of sniping at one another once the tide turned a little bit. All they had
it
to
was
do
tough
was
for them.
punch one in, and that would have been game.
Yeah, they were playing the same line there for the last 7 points.
Yeah.
And you could tell they were getting tired. You could tell they were hesitating a little bit, not being able to play their offense. And like you said, NC State got hot. So that kind of puts things in perspective of the day. We have an idea of who's going into quarters now and who's been eliminated. If you were going to pick a winner for today, what team would you talk about?
The winner for today, I think the best ultimate I saw today was played by Penn State.
Yeah.
Early in the NC State game. But I think the two teams you have to talk about are South Carolina, and surprising pretty much everybody, going out winning their pool and their crossover, and North Carolina, whose handlers I think really complement Thomas and Christian well, and their guys have a lot of composure with the disc. So it's funny because I feel like the Ohio Valley and Metro East teams had, on the whole, a better performance, maybe because they didn't have the bottom dwellers coming out, and then Virginia also laying an egg. But at the end, when the dust settles, I think there's two crossover winners in UNC and South Carolina, the ones that really took the day for me.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that Penn State maybe played some of the best ultimate at times, but couldn't win the games when it counted. Well, that kind of recaps of what we saw today at Easterns. We'll have a great set of action tomorrow, some interesting quarter matchups, and we'll get back to you then.
Yeah.
So this is thanks for tuning in. This is Bryan Jones, Noah Scoober, Jonathan Neeley of Inside Breaks. Thanks for listening to a recap of day one of Fall Easterns.